Hi, welcome back. This is Cybersecurity for Everyone, and I'm Dr. Charles Harry. In our last video, we talked about the threat landscape, and today I want to talk about the challenge for policymakers in this space. The problem with the threat landscape, as we discussed last time, is that in addition to trying to resolve some of the specific technical vulnerabilities in the internet, we have to deal with the hackers, their process, techniques, effects, as well as the complexity of the attack surface. And so the fundamental problem for the policymaker is that we, first of all, have a wide range of targets that are available for the hackers to go after. And so there are some fundamental questions that the policymakers need to ask themselves. Things like, should the government provide greater regulatory oversight on specific industry sectors? So does the entertainment sector bear more regulatory oversight versus the electrical grid? Well, people would probably say no with that, with that particular issue. But we have to ask ourselves this question for every sector we want to discuss. But in addition to targets, there are a range of actors. We have hobbyists. We have what are called hacktivists, people that are hacking for some social or political agenda, as well as a variety of nation states and criminal syndicates that are potentially going after a variety of targets. And so we need to figure out what types of penalties should we enact for a variety of different actors. Should we enact different penalties for each one of these actors? Is there an international standard that is required to attribute an attack to a specific country? So if so, is that become a de facto red line for when one country decides that they're able to respond in kind to another country? These are good questions that policymakers have to ask themselves and that need to be addressed. But in addition to the actors, there's a range of attack vectors. There's lots of different ways that I as a hacker can come after you. I can utilize, yes, phishing attacks, but there are a range of other techniques that one might be able to use. So understanding how the various networks can be attacked is important. And so for a government, I need to ask myself, what are the types of technical vulnerabilities that I want to make sure that the majority of particular industries in my economy need to be aware of? Should I make them aware of it? If I have an intelligence apparatus who works for me and they discover a new vulnerability in a particular critical infrastructure system, should they be forced to actually disclose that particular vulnerability? Or do I want to keep it for myself to use to gather information? These are fundamental questions that have to be asked. There's a diverse set of attack surfaces. Remember, what we're fundamentally talking about here is the confluence between technical, human, and organizational systems together. And where they meet, the so-called seams, between these three different domains are potential areas in which hackers can exploit. We also have to deal with a diverse set of attack surfaces, because remember, what we're talking about is the confluence between human, organizational, and human systems together. And in some cases, the government may want to require certain companies to have a greater level of insight into, let's say, who their vendors are. If we're talking about an electrical provider, we may want them to have a better sense of understanding of who's providing their hardware and software into those critical systems. So governments need to figure out what the right level of interaction is for a variety of different operators in specific industries. Because what might be permissible and maybe even warranted or wanted in, let's say, an electrical provider may not be the same case for someone in the retail sector. So we need to think more broadly about what is the role of government in this space. And then finally, we need to think about complex effects. We need to understand that the effects that hackers can have in one part of your network might cascade to other parts of your network or to other organizations entirely. So how do we manage that? How do we manage the impacts on one particular organization cascading through the rest of an industrial sector? If I take down part of a port facility in a particular location in the United States, that will have logistics effects to other organizations that leverage that port facility to ship their goods and services. I need to understand that. How do I model it? How do I manage that complexity? So the threat landscape challenge for the government and for policymakers, but also, frankly, for organizational leaders of all ilk, require us to understand that the range of actors, the range of targets, vectors of attack, the attack surfaces, and complex effects come together. And there are a range of questions we need to address. So now that we've talked about the fundamental challenge of the threat landscape, let's explore some examples. In our next video, we'll take a look at 4 specific examples that have occurred, and we'll talk about some of the nuances. See you next time.